Happy holidays, Wheel of Time community, and welcome to the Wheel of Time Pod-Thru. I'm Teresa.
And I'm Tim.
And together, we're going to pod through Robert Jordan's Wheel of Time book series. How you doing, Tim?
Doing all right. It's been really fun getting ready for the holidays and Christmas shopping for you and everybody else. So I'm looking forward to Christmas. I am so in the spirit.
Me too. So before we get started, we just want to remind you that this is a reread. We assume that you've read the entire series, so there will be spoilers. You have been warned. All right, Tim, what are we going to be doing in today's episode?
Today we're going to be discussing chapters 37 and 38 of the Dragon Reborn, where Egwene continues her campaign for worst person ever, and we meet some Maidens of the Spirit. Chapter 37 is called Fires and Cairhien, and the icon is the rising sun of Cairhien.
Here's a quick summary to act as a reminder for those of you who are not reading along with us. The Supergirls are sailing down the Cairhien on a ship called the Blue Crane, very close to the shores of Cairhien. The captain stayed close to the shore to try to avoid mud flats, and Egwene has a close-up view from the deck at the smoldering ruins of burned villages as they pass. It had been the same for days, not a living soul visible, but plenty of fires. Despite Nynaeve's arguments that Eggs and Elaine were too young to pass as Aes Sedai, all three girls were posing as full sisters. The captain and crew of the Blue Crane were mostly from Tar Valon, so their passage came with a lot of bowing from the men, happy to serve Aes Sedai. Egwene loses herself in thoughts about her dreams for a while. She was still trying to figure out how the dream ring tangriel worked, and hadn't learned anything useful about the Black Ajah fugitives. Her dreams without the ring were just as confusing. She knew her dreams meant something, but she wasn't sure what, and it wasn't just dreams of Rand, Mat, and Perrin. But she also saw men and women breaking out of cages and putting on crowns, a woman pulling layers of puppet strings, and white cloaks ravaging the two rivers. She had even reluctantly let Nynaeve and Elaine sleep one night with the stone ring, but they hadn't seen anything helpful about the Black Ajah either. Elaine came on deck and joined Eggs at the rail. Elaine comments that it's terrible, and Egwene, still lost in her own thoughts, asks what is. Elaine gives her a startled look and then a frown. That, she gestured toward the distant smoke. How can you ignore it? Egwene replies that she ignores it because she can't do anything about it and they have to get to Tyr. She was becoming more and more convinced that the key to everything was in the heart of the stone. Elaine tells her that she still can't help but feel for the people of Cairhien and what they're going through. Eggs retorts that she's heard lectures on the long history of wars between Andor and Cairhien, implying that Elaine shouldn't care. Elaine explains that since the damage Cairhien suffered during the Ale War, Andor has sold them grain. You cannot feed a people for 20 years and feel nothing for them when they must be starving. Apparently not listening to a word Elaine was saying, Egwene blurts out, "A gray man," and scares the crap out of Elaine, who embraces the source and looks around for danger. Egwene had suddenly realized that her dreams of Mat meant that a gray man was after him. She explains and laments that she finally knows what one of her dreams means, but it doesn't matter because she can't do anything about it. Elaine tries to reassure her and suggests that the three of them sit down and rehash the dreams, and maybe they can figure them out. But she's interrupted when the ship gives a great shuddering lurch and they're thrown to the deck. The captain starts yelling at his crew about mud flaps, and Nynaeve appears from below deck in a foul mood. She marches over to the captain to give him a piece of her mind. The going theory is that the Blue Crane hit a sunken ship, probably the work of river brigands, and will be stuck until another ship comes along with enough sweeps to help them out. Nynaeve wants to disembark because there's no telling how long it might be before another ship appears, days maybe, and they can't afford to waste the time. There's a town 6 miles down the Cairhien shore where the Blue Crane can meet up with them if the captain can get it free, or else they may board another ship. Elaine quickly agrees that it's a good idea, and Egwene grudgingly says that she supposes it is too. The captain tries to convince them to get off on the Andor side where it's safer, but Nynaeve refuses to walk 15 miles to the nearest village when she can walk 6. She tells the captain to ready his rowboat and goes to gather her things. Elaine tells Egwene that if she and Nynaeve don't stop fighting and start working together, they aren't going to make it to Tyr. Eggs tries to put it all on Nynaeve, and Elaine lets it go. Once ashore, Egwene stalks off without waiting for the others so that she can prevent Nynaeve from taking the lead. Elaine is fed up with the both of them and is learning what it would be like to be a middle sister. Egwene announces that if they do come across brigands, she is going to defend herself now that there's no Amyrlin nearby to enforce the rules. Before that conversation can get too far, however, a figure in brown and gray rose from behind a bush, standing by itself almost in front of them.
There are subtle details in Jordan's writing that make me feel like he knew what he was writing about. We get some descriptions of the way the river has mudflats that shift from time to time, and how the deckhands check ropes that appear not to need checking. Jordan lived in Charleston, South Carolina, a coastal city with rivers and other freshwater tributaries that run into the ocean. So river boats and other watercraft were something he literally grew up around. Like, these details give a bit of authenticity to the scene without lecturing us on the art of river navigation, which I really appreciate. As a person who likes how things work and learning about them, I kind of like how Egwene watches the sailors go about their tasks. We get this line, "She vowed to learn at least some of what they were doing. She did not like feeling ignorant." It's not like she wants to learn to be a sailor, but she wants to understand everything. And sometimes trying to learn about something is a great way to take your mind off of other things you don't want to think about.
Yeah, and I mean, Egwene is definitely someone who wants to learn all the things.
Yes.
No matter what it is. She's so hungry for knowledge.
Absolutely.
The majority of this chapter is dedicated to three things. One, to establish that Nynaeve and Egwene are at each other's throats in their constant battle for power over each other. Two, to confirm Egwene is a dreamer and she's still having prophetic dreams that give the reader clues about what will happen. I didn't go through them in my summary, but they're fun to take a look at. And three, to let us know that Cairhien is hosed.
Yeah.
Like, Tom started a war and it's tearing Cairhien apart. The nobles are too busy squabbling over the Sun Throne, and the people are suffering because of it.
Yep.
Most of Randland becomes war-torn as the series progresses, with refugees everywhere, and this is just the start of it.
It sure is. Egwene is lost in her own drama right now, and does not really register what the burning towns and villages along the river means. She's so wrapped up in her own thoughts about her dreams, about Rand, and all the other stuff she's been experiencing, that it just kind of sails by. Egwene is a woman on a mission. She has to find the Black Ajah sisters and protect the tower from any further damage that they may do. Egwene, for better or worse, is already putting the needs of the tower above all else. Elaine and Egwene have very different points of view about the burning towns that they see along the river.
Yeah, for sure.
Elaine has been raised to look after those who are under her control and to provide for them.
Yeah.
Egwene grew up as part of a well-off family in a small town of people who were used to a hard life. They had only themselves to rely on and were accustomed to rebuilding on their own. In Jordan's world, people who grew up without nobles in the picture are used to making their own decisions and living with the consequences. On this reread, I realized that part of the reason Egwene is able to just focus on her mission and put the burning villages out of her mind is because she's from a people who are used to taking care of themselves. They don't need a noble to rush in. They just need to pick themselves up and rebuild, at least in her mind.
That's actually a really good point. Like, I hadn't thought about it from that perspective. But that makes sense. At least it's better than thinking Egwene's cold-hearted.
True, yeah. Egwene recalls a history lesson about Andor and quotes it at Elaine. Quote,
Yeah.
Benea Sedai says you and Cairhien have fought more often than any other two nations except for Tyr and Ilion.
Sisters fight, Tim.
Yes, sisters fight. Absolutely. Like, I realized this time just how out of context Egwene's understanding of relationships between Andor and Cairhien is. She just sees the two of them as countries that she learned about in a lecture, but she does not get the subtlety of what she's talking about. After Tigraine ran off to the waste, when Andor's throne was left empty, Elaine's grandmother was set to become the new queen, but she died before the succession was complete, so Morghese made the claim instead. when she turned around 16 years old. This all happened right before the Ale War. Morghese agreed to marry Terengel Damdred to improve relations with Cairhien. And very early in her reign, she took steps to solidify the relationship with the Cairhien after the war by selling the grain as they rebuilt. So by making this statement, Egwene basically is implying that Elaine is a hypocrite for saying that she cares about someone she thinks is an enemy. But she's also completely disregarding the hard work and efforts that Elaine has seen her mother put into rebuilding the relationship with Cairhien over the last 20 years.
Yeah.
It's really easy to put your foot in your mouth when you speak without knowing the full situation.
Yeah, that's actually a really, really good point. And not only that, but Elaine has legitimate claim to the Sun Throne.
Yes, she does.
If she chose to make it. So, under the right circumstances, these could be her people starving and suffering.
Yeah.
But more than that, it's just really insulting for Egwene to imply that Elaine should only care about them if they are her people. I mean, it's called basic human decency, Eggs. Damn. You know, like,
yeah.
Really? I mean, Morghese raised Elaine to be a good and noble ruler someday. She doesn't see normal people as simple peasants to be trodden on, like some rulers do. I mean, she's not Tyrion.
Sure.
You know, she's been taught that she has a responsibility to those under her, and that sentiment does not end with lines on a map.
Right.
Elaine has a very tender heart, and she cares deeply about all people. And, I mean, Egwene is being really cold-hearted here, you know?
She kind of is, yeah.
Yeah. And I have to say that it really pissed me off that Egwene wasn't listening to Elaine.
Right?
She's still thinking about herself, as always, and about her dreams. Like, I know that we're both trying really hard not to, bash Egwene too much in this episode, but she makes it increasingly more difficult.
She kind of does. Yeah.
On the plus side, she figures out that Matt's being chased by a gray man, so woohoo.
Because that's a great way to pay attention to your friend. Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
Yeah. Good times.
Side note about riverboats. What happens in this chapter is why riverboats hardly ever deviate from their established routes, especially back in the 1700s and 1800s here in America. These days, even small personal fishing boats have depth finder equipment, but back in the day, you had to be familiar with the water that you traveled to know where the deep and the shallow areas are. On top of that, those areas are always changing because a river moves so quickly. Like, if you knew your section of the river, and if you keep to that territory, you are less likely to sink your ship. Not a problem we have today, so it makes sense that if the Blue Crane had a newbie at the helm, they could have run aground on a mudflat. Even more so if they were going faster than usual to make better time.
Now I just have Rolling on a River stuck in my head.
Oh. While Nynaeve explains her plan to leave the ship, go to the nearest village, and so forth, I flash back to the last chapter. Moraine flat out refuses to explain anything to Perrin because it would take too long. In this chapter, Nynaeve spends a lot of time and energy explaining the details to Egwene. She does it without taking a breath, too. It must be so exhausting. No wonder Moraine does not explain unless she has to.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know about that. I think it's reasonable for Egwene and Elaine to want an explanation from Nynaeve. Like, they are on equal footing now. So asking Nynaeve to show her math and then deciding together what to do is not an unreasonable request, you know?
Well, that's true. That's true.
I mean, it definitely takes longer to do things by committee for sure. But at this stage, it is the best course of action. But I agree that it is exhausting to have someone so insistent on challenging you that they refuse to admit when you've made an obviously good suggestion. Or to go to ridiculous lengths to get even the smallest advantage over you at every possible turn. Now that is really exhausting for everyone involved. I feel so sorry for Elaine in this book.
Yeah. Elaine's in a bad spot.
Yeah.
One thing I like about Elaine is that she really does try to play the peacemaker. She tries so hard to get Nynaeve and Egwene to be civil to each other, or at least to talk, and you can tell she just wants to smack them both.
Mm-hmm.
She knows they can't succeed if they don't work together, and is trying to keep them from killing each other. The Hufflepuff in me appreciates this. And we end the chapter with a mysterious person appearing. This follows their discussion about Greymen and bandits and works as a really great cliffhanger to propel us into the next chapter.
Mm-hmm.
That wraps up Chapter 37. Chapter 38 is called Maidens of the Spear, and the icon is the wheel.
I wonder why it was the wheel and not the, spears icon.
That's a good question, because Maidens of the Spear usually follows with the spear icon.
Well, all of the Super Ale chapters have the spears, don't they? Or is there... That's the icon for the ale, right?
Usually, yes. Maybe it's because this is such a pivotal meeting of people. This is kind of the crossing Nynaeve, Egwene, Elaine, Avienda, all in the same spot. I mean, maybe they were trying to get clued in that this is a major pivotal wheel moment.
Maybe. Or maybe they just haven't come up with that icon yet. Because we haven't had too much to do with the ale yet. So maybe they just hadn't created it yet.
Could be.
Interesting. Egwene and Elaine both scream and embrace Sidar. Egwene already weaving flows of air and fire into lightning. A young ale woman stood before them. Elaine let go of the source, and Nynaeve had never embraced it, but Egwene held on. She knew from her experience with the Shan-Chen how dangerous a woman could be. Still, she felt affinity for the woman, almost a kinship for some reason. She thinks it might be because she looks a lot like Rand. The woman introduces herself as Avienda, a maiden of the spear. She tells them that while they don't have the look of Aes Sedai in their faces, she recognized the rings on their hands. Aes Sedai are much like the Ale Wise Ones. She asks if they are of the White Tower. Eggs wonders at the use of the word we, but she can't see anyone else and figures any others would have to be at least 200 paces away. You'd have to be a good bowman to make that shot, and she feels secure that she is ready to throw lightning at anyone who might try. We are women of the White Tower, Nynaeve said calmly. She was very obvious in not looking around for other ale. Whether you would consider any of us wise is another matter, Nynaeve went on. What do you want of us? That's enough to convince Avienda, who tells them that they talk like wise ones do. She tells them that one of the ale is hurt, possibly dying, and asks for healing. Nynaeve agrees to help, but makes no promises, telling Avienda that the ale might still die no matter what she does. 2 more maidens rose, not 10 paces away, lowering black veils. Avienda leads them all to a thicket, Nynaeve keeping close to her. Egwene is deeply suspicious of the ale, but Elaine tries to make conversation, introducing herself as Daughter Heir. The 2 women respond that they are Bane and Chiad of the Sharad and Goshen ale, respectively. Eggs gets the feeling that they view her silence as bad manners, so she introduces herself as well. They have a very confusing conversation where we learn a lot about ale culture. Yay. Elaine and Egwene are spared total humiliation at their lack of knowledge when they come across 2 more ale deep in the thicket, near the river. Avienda explains that Dallin was stabbed with a sword. Nynaeve immediately tends to her and asks if Dallin has been moved. Avienda tells her that Dallin wanted to die near water. Nynaeve begins rummaging in her pouch for herbs, calling them fools and telling them they could have killed her by moving her like that. Avienda says that the wise ones use herbs, but that she had not heard that Aes Sedai use them. Nynaeve snaps at her that she uses what she wants to use, and Chiad mutters to Bane that she truly does sound like a wise one. Afraid that Nynaeve was going to offend them, and afraid they would kill them all with their spears, Egwene tries to get them talking about something peaceful. She shows her ignorance again, remarking on their unease with the river, saying it's mild enough to swim in. When they all look at her blankly, she points out that she had said she was from the Stones River Sept, and Egwene asks if they ever swam in the Stones River. Even Elaine looks at her like she were mad. We get more exposition about ale culture, and Egwene embraces the source again, more distrustful of the ale than ever. Nynaeve gives Dallin her mixture of herbs to drink, all the while grumbling and muttering about swords and foolishness and stabbing women, really working herself up. The maidens grow uneasy, and Avienda worriedly asks if she's angry. Eggs and Elaine reassure her that her anger is a good thing in this case. The glow of Sidar surrounded Nynaeve suddenly, and Egwene thinks she saw a bit of what had been done. She was not sure she'd even been able to make out all the many flows, much less the way Nynaeve had woven them together. What Nynaeve had done in those few seconds had seemed like weaving 4 carpets at once while blindfolded. There was no wound and no scar, only pale, healthy skin. Nynaeve tells them to clean Dylan up and be ready to feed her, then knelt by the water to wash her hands.
Egwene's PTSD is totally triggered when they are surprised by Aviendha.
Mm-hmm.
She doesn't think about restraining the ale with air or anything like that. She jumps right to preparing to throw lightning, the same weave that she used in Falme to destroy groups of people. But unlike her overreaction with the White Cloaks at the beginning of the book, she's able to step back a bit this time, put the brakes on, and not attack the stranger. I just want to give her credit where it's due. Now that she has a little distance from her enslavement, she is starting to get to the place where she can work through it. She still is terrified of the possibility of being made Domine again, but she's at a place where the fear does not completely override her reason.
Yeah, Egwene is still having a hard time recovering from her time with the Shanshan. She sees that Elaine lets go of the source and chalks it up to foolish notions that women aren't as dangerous as men. And Egwene specifically thinks, quote, she was never a Shanshan prisoner, as proof that she knows better.
Right.
As I was reading, I thought that Egwene was especially paranoid with the ale, keeping hold of the source and not believing them when they and Elaine told her that they wouldn't hurt her. But you reminded me the last time she met strangers from a different culture was the Shanshan.
Yeah.
It makes sense she would be extra wary from now on.
Mm-hmm.
It was extremely traumatic, and it's going to take Egwene a while to heal from it.
Yeah. If ever.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, I think she does eventually, but it takes a lot.
Yeah, I mean, and what
her time with the Wise Ones helped.
Yeah, it really did. I was referring more to, like, it will eventually heal, but she's definitely going to be carrying that with her for the rest of her life. The scars. So.
Yeah.
I love that Nynaeve's response to the danger here is basically, we don't have time for this. She just stands there with her arms crossed like a mom who's staring down at a kid who's acting up. Like, I really wish we could have had this chapter from her point of view.
Yeah.
We get this line when Egwene realizes the woman on the road is an ale. Quote, looking at her, Egwene felt a sudden affinity for the woman. She could not understand it. Egwene goes on to rationalize that this is because the woman looks so much like Rand. The first time I read this, I didn't think much of it, but now I feel like there's more to it than that. I think the affinity she feels is because of the fact that Aviendha can channel, and Egwene is seeing it in her for the first time. What do you think?
Oh, yeah, for sure. Like, I absolutely think that this is Jordan putting in a hint for what's to come later.
Okay.
Like, it makes sense that you wouldn't have picked up on it on, like, your first read or whatever. Because who knew that Aviendha was ever going to come back? So who cares?
Right.
And, you know, we've leaned so heavily on the whole Rand looks just like an ale. Isn't that so weird? So, like, it makes sense that you would read it and think, oh, this is just another hint that Rand's an ale. But in addition to that, now that we know who Aviendha is and we know that, you know, she can, in fact, channel, then, yeah, this is Jordan laying down the foundation of Egwene feels that kinship or an affinity for her because she can channel, and we'll find that out later.
Cool.
In the Dragon Reborn specifically, all of the chapters with the girls are from Egwene's perspective. So we get a lot of complaining about Nynaeve's bad attitude.
Yes, we do.
But I want to point out that it's Nynaeve's way of speaking and acting that convinces the ale that they are like the Wise Ones, even though they are too young. Aviendha tells her, you talk as the Wise Ones do, to the point and small suffering of fools. And later, when Nynaeve angrily snaps at Aviendha regarding her use of the herbs, we get this. She truly does sound like a wise one, Chad told Bane softly, and the other woman gave a tight nod. If Nynaeve wasn't so commanding, and let's face it, surly, things may have gone a lot differently because Elaine and Egwene aren't doing a very good job of convincing anyone that they're Aes Sedai.
Right.
At least not yet.
Yeah, not yet. Nynaeve is awesome.
Yeah. And I mean, once we do finally meet the Alewise ones, it's like, oh, yes, yeah. I understand.
Gotcha.
Completely. I get it now. Cerealia? Oh, yeah, I get it.
I love this line that Aviendha says in response to the fact that her spear sister may die even with Nynaeve's help. Quote, "Death comes for us all," the Ale said. "We can only choose how to face it when it comes." Unquote. You can tell a lot about a culture based on how they deal with death. Mm-hmm. The Ale are people who are not fazed by death at all. It's just part of their daily life, which says so much about who they are as a people.
Yeah, true.
This is our first introduction to Bane and Chiad. For some reason, I always forget that we run into them here.
Yeah, me too.
Probably because they end up as part of the Perrin Fail storyline and don't spend much time with Aviendha once we get into the next book. Mm-hmm. But this is where we meet them. Intercultural exchanges can be hard to pull off without being offensive. Elaine does a really good job of smoothing things over, almost like she's been raised to be a queen one day or something. The discussion about first sisters, the confusion about why maidens would not like men, the talk about Ruidian, give us glimpses into this people who I think Jordan had a deep fondness and respect for. But we can get into that cool stuff about the Ale in the next book.
Yeah, we get a lot of good information about the Ale here, but it will all be rehashed in the next book when we head off to the Waste. So we may as well wait.
Yeah.
But I do remember my first time reading this, I was just soaking up all the information about the Ale I could get. Like, they were fascinating. And
yeah,
of course, there's the obvious connection to Rand. I wanted as much detail as possible, so I love this chapter for giving it to me. You know?
Right? Yeah, I clearly remember the first time reading through the books feeling completely lost about everything that Ale said about First Sisters. Mm-hmm. Which is likely because we're in Egwene's point of view, and that's how she feels.
Yeah.
I know that Jordan meant for a lot of the misunderstandings about the Ale to come off as comedy, and the sentiment of Ale be crazy does make me laugh at many points in the story.
Yeah.
But we still need to be careful not to label others in a way that implies that they can never be understood. Mm-hmm. Egwene immerses herself into the Ale culture in later books, and she does start to gain an understanding of how their culture and customs work. Mm-hmm. And this is something I know I need to be better at in my own life. Instead of just assuming someone is so different that I'll never understand them, I need to push past that and understand what I can. Yeah,
for sure. So this whole scene when Nynaeve finally gets to Dylan is kind of hilarious. She's trying to work up her anger so that she can channel. So while Egwene and Elaine are having this whole lengthy conversation about rivers and swimming and Ale customs involving wise ones, Nynaeve is working with her herbs, muttering and grousing to herself, slowly getting louder and louder. And I can't wait to see this play out on screen as this crazy witchy woman in the background becomes more and more of a distraction. And then, of course, she rocks.
Right, exactly.
Like, it's going to be great. I can't wait.
Yeah, I just love the muttering, mutter, talking, almost shouting now. Yeah, I love it. I almost feel like Jordan was leaning in a little hard on the Ale are afraid of bodies of water thing.
Yeah.
Like, we heard Urian talk about this in The Great Hunt. We had Gull talk about it a few chapters ago, and here we are talking about it again. Like, do you think he brought this up too much, or am I just biased because I grew up in a desert?
Maybe. No, he really is repeating himself. But I don't know. I mean, the conversation that Perrin has with Gall and the conversation that Egwene and Elaine have with Aviendha and Bane and Chiad are actually really similar.
Yes, they are.
So it does sort of feel like we're getting this same information over again when we want to know other things.
Yeah.
But I think he was just trying to trickle it out to get us hooked. Like, he wanted to tease it so that we wanted to know more so that we would read more books.
And do you think maybe he ran into like a bit of a problem where like he split the party up? So like everyone's gonna need the same information. So we're gonna have to rehash it a couple times just from now that everybody's separated. Everybody has to like acquire the knowledge.
Maybe, although they all come back together in Tyr.
True.
So they could have learned all of this in Tyr. I don't know. I see what you're saying though. It does feel a little repetitive.
Yeah.
So I get what you're saying. Jordan put in some subtle hints that Avienda can channel, like I was saying before. You know, like we said, Egwene feels that affinity or kinship with her. And then here, Egwene has the weaves ready to be used if need be. Elaine can see the glow around Egwene and shakes her head to tell her it's not necessary. But she doesn't actually say anything to indicate that Egwene is prepared to channel. Avienda suddenly tells her that she would never hurt an Aes Sedai, no matter what happened with Dallin.
Right.
Avienda isn't at the point where she can see the glow yet, but she can feel it. It's subtle and probably not something that you would catch on your first time through, but it's a nice little nod on subsequent reads.
Yeah, I agree.
And finally, the girls cotton on to the fact that Nynaeve is getting angry on purpose so that she can channel. It takes them way too long to realize what this trick is all about and to see her anger as a good thing instead of something to hold against her.
Right.
Nynaeve is prickly. She just is. But, I mean, can you blame her? If she wants to channel at all, whether it's to defend herself or to heal someone or to light a freaking candle, she has to be angry. It's exhausting to keep her emotions in such a state of flux, and I don't think she gets enough credit for how difficult it would be to live with that block.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
People love to hate on her because she's angry all the time. But Jordan wrote her with that specific handicap to force her to stay in a quasi-angry state. Because we see everything from Egwene's perspective, who has a huge chip on her shoulder in regard to Nynaeve and is not capable of being generous or understanding to her at all right now. We don't see the toll this takes on Nynaeve. You know, she's painted in a pretty unforgiving light in The Dragon Reborn, but I would argue that this is neither fair nor accurate.
And I would agree with you, because it is all from, you know, it's that whole unreliable narrator thing. Like, this is
all from Egwene's perspective, and Egwene's got some problems right now. Like, she's got some issues.
Just a few, understandably so.
But, like, I really think, in a way, Jordan did Nynaeve dirty. You know, like...
Yeah.
So here's the problem. You know, like... Women are so often painted as being angry or nagging or unreasonable and overly emotional, and they're either crying or flying off the handle or whatever because of years and years of misogyny.
To sum
you know,
it up,
you know, science fiction and fantasy has historically been rooted in groups that lean heavily towards misogyny.
That was a very political way of stating that. Well done.
I mean, things have definitely changed, but these books weren't written in 2019. These books were written in the 90s.
Yeah.
So, I mean, it was still very much an old boys club. So I could see why Jordan would have chosen to make Nynaeve angry all the time as a joke, to make her this, like, comedic harpy character who's always angry and unreasonable. And when it was only going to be 2 or 3 books, or maybe 4 books total, he wasn't going to give her that much depth of character. But he did. He did give her depth of character. She's an amazing character. But he wrote her with this horrible block where she's forced to keep herself in this state all the time.
Yeah.
And it's really unfortunate because when you have a group of people, like the history of fantasy fandom and you know, that it's a lot of people who have been influenced by misogyny.
Yes.
You know, things have changed. Don't at me. Things have changed. I get it. Okay. I'm sorry. I get it. Anyway, the point is, when most of your fanboys are used to bagging on women anyway, this just plays right into their preconceived misconceptions.
It does.
And it's really, really unfortunate because Nynaeve is a great character, but it's so easy to dismiss her as unreasonable or overly emotional because of the parameters Jordan set in place for her.
Agreed. Like that, and I think that's where we do see a lot of the like negativity towards Nynaeve, especially on. Well, Facebook is just a pit of hell anywhere you go. Twitter's much better, but even in the good spaces where we see fans interacting, Nynaeve gets a lot of like shame and a lot of shade thrown at her. It's like, nah. I think you're absolutely right that Jordan did her dirty, especially this first few books. I'm really glad that he allowed her block to be removed later.
Yeah.
But yeah, it is very frustrating to see like the stereotypical portrayal of Nynaeve here.
Yeah, and I mean, like, it'd be one thing if she acted this way with no reason.
Yeah.
But she has a very good reason, like the only way she can channel for anything, no matter if it's a life and death situation or if it's like a simple thing, she has to be angry.
Yeah.
So she's kind of stuck. And because she has this block, certain allowances have to be made for her behavior,
Yeah.
Whereas if she didn't have the block and she still acted this way, it would be a whole different story. It'd be like, okay, Elida Jr., what the hell, But that's not what's happening here. She has a legitimate reason for being unreasonable. You know what I mean? So, I don't know. I get frustrated. I get very, very frustrated because I don't think that Nynaeve gets nearly enough credit. Thank you for coming to my TED Talk.
When Nynaeve finally gets her anger up to the point where she can channel, she completed the healing in very little time at all.
Yeah, it's real fast.
She is so fast that both Egwene and Elaine aren't able to see what she weaves. Mm-hmm. And Dalian is completely healed, even without a scar. But the thing that sticks out in my mind, and the part of why I really wish this was through Nynaeve's point of view, is that once the patient has been cared for, she washes her hands.
Okay.
It's a good practice considering that they were covered in blood.
Yeah.
But do you think she may also kind of be washing off the feeling of having wielded the power? Like she still feels dirty for having wielded it?
Ooh, I like that. I would not have thought in those terms, but maybe, because she's still definitely in that state where she doesn't like admitting that she can channel. I mean,
yeah.
She knows that she can, and she's learning, and it's like, okay, I'm on this track. But she still resents it.
Absolutely. It's part of the reason she has the block. She resents that this is something she has to do.
Yeah, so maybe that's actually really cool. That she's not just literally washing away like the blood and the unpleasantness, but she's metaphorically washing away the unpleasantness of her refusal to accept that she can channel.
Exactly.
Yeah, no, I like that a lot. I don't know if that's what Jordan meant, but works for me. I'm on board.
Because, it's what we do. We completely pick things apart, and we come up with things and make them headcanon, and we're done.
Yeah, exactly.
And that's it for chapters 37 and 38 of The Dragon Reborn. Join us next week to discuss chapter 39, which is very long, so we'll be covering it by itself.
We hope that you enjoyed this episode of the Wheel of Time Pod-Thru.
We'll see you again next week. Make sure that you rate and subscribe to us on Apple Podcasts or whatever your favorite podcatcher might be. If you could leave us a positive review, it would really help us out. It makes us more visible so other people can find us. You can tweet us at Pod-Thru or email us at whatpodthru@gmail.com and tell us your thoughts on anything we covered today. Just don't at Teresa.
That's WOTPODTHRU@gmail.com, or find our Wheel of Time Pod-Thru channel on YouTube. Like, subscribe, ring the bell. You know the drill. Thanks, everybody. Have a happy and safe holiday no matter what you celebrate. And we hope the wheel weaves you in our direction again soon.